If you're over 50, over 60, nearly retired, or already retired, let me ask, in these years after 50, after 60, have you looked back at your life and thought, wow, that went fast? What if this next phase passes me by like that? Then maybe you noticed you had been following what was placed in front of you, or maybe what you fell into. Your life took its course, and you followed. Maybe it's a time to reconsider how you approach this next phase, especially if you're healthy, desire purpose and intentionality. When I say wasted my best years, I don't mean my life was worthless. I accomplished much, raised a family of 4 that have now grown into 20 with grandchildren and spouses. I don't really believe anything is wasted. So really what I'm referring to is living only half a life. That part formed in my head and not from my very being, the real me, the core of who I am. I wasn't in touch with my mind and heart. The difference between living only from my head and discovering my heart's desires was a huge jump forward for me, and can be for you as well. If you give yourself space to connect with the issues of life that are begging for your attention and consciousness. Today is a very similar topic to last week. What do I really believe? That is, the real me, at the core of my being, the essence of who I am. Not what do I think about what I believe, but what do I, the real me, believe about life, death, family, relationships, connection, identity, love, purpose, faith, religion. Last week I addressed the matter of what we men over 50 do to handle the question, what is love and do I really love? I shared how I did not know what love is until these recent years. I noted that many do not know what love is or how to express it other than to do things, to buy things, and to give things, which addresses responsibility more than love. Finally, I shared that for me, love was rooted in my head, the brain, and cannot be understood from that amazing organ of our bodies, that database of information. So same idea today, different reality. You see, belief too does not live in the head. Oh yes, one form of it does. The one we've generated, the one we have accepted, the one we have become comfortable with while going about the matters of life. In the head, we generate concepts. We develop ways of seeing the world. We create methods of dealing with our lives. We establish rules for living. But all of this has little to do with who we are. Rather, it involves what we think, not what we believe of our being, the place who I am, the core that dwells in the recesses of our soul. What I identify here on this channel as the mind and the heart. When we think in our heads, is so influenced by our culture, our upbringing, our life experiences, and what we have learned, and so much more. But getting in touch with the real me was a transforming reckoning. The mind and heart is the way the well-established truth of Scripture, as well as many great philosophers, identify the real you, the conscious you, as the mind and the heart. One may say, wait, are you saying I've been living a lie all these years? I don't know if you have been. Rather, I can only tell you what happened to me. And the answer for me is yes. I lived a lie for decades. Not consciously, of course, but when assessed from the vantage point of who I am, how I've been designed, the experiences I've accumulated over those decades, then yes, for me, the simple way to say it is, yes, I was living a lie. For me, I even obliterated the standards I had established for my life and went down a dark hole of questions and answers and experiences for several years. And this shocked my family and my friends. But that's a story for another time. The point is, when not in touch with who you are, all sorts of events may come and go in our life experience. After those 8 to 10 years, I came to learn who I am during 9 days away from home in a life-changing setting with about 50 others. We were there to look more deeply into our minds and hearts, to become more connected with others, to learn what living authentically looks like, and to experience life away from the day-to-day stuff of life long enough to be asked the questions that for me, I had never addressed. So yes, I slowed down enough to look seriously at my life, my past, my childhood, the decades in between, and right up until that moment in time that we gathered in Austin, Texas. We assessed our current experience and what we each hope for in the coming years. We were redirected when our answers came from our heads rather than our heart. All this was like a slap in the face for me. It was a time of waking up to see who I am at the core of my being. A time to be real, honest, and authentic in ways I'd never taken the time to consider in the previous decades. For me, it was particularly revealing because I came to discover I am an honest, authentic, loving leader. But all my life, to that point, I had been living someone else, or attempting to. I was living up opposite to who I am, dishonestly, inauthentically, and not knowing what love is. Again, not in a conscious way. Rather, it was the result of my learned and then programmed methods I had taught myself in my head to live life that seemed to me to be unreal and unnatural. The change for me first resulted in my book, Metamorphosis, Asleep, Aware, Awake, Alive. And now I invite and assist others over 50, over 60, and then over 60 to consider a similar journey so this last chapter can be the most interesting, most authentic, and most valuable time of one's life. Other people will say in jest, he, or sometimes she, doesn't have a heart. This phrase is, of course, not true, not real. And of course, we're not talking about the physical organ behind our chest. I'm referring to the real you, the conscious you, the essence of who you are. What people mean when they use that expression, one does not have a heart, and they may not express it exactly this way, but they are sharing their perspective of how another human being is so disconnected from their feelings, their essence, their true personhood, and all they can do is answer questions from the brain. Here in this amazing organ, the rules have been set, the guidelines are established. The way we operate is rooted and grounded in these regulations that we've set for ourselves. This clearly expressed my own experience. While on the one hand, I desired deeper connection with others and somehow had a sense that I wanted more depth, I didn't have a clue how to get there from here. It was an elusive, reaching, searching, desiring something that was not defined. Why? Because I was attempting to do it all intellectually, figure things out, assess the circumstances, review the facts, consider all the knowledge I had regarding a given matter. You see, when we operate only from the head, and I have not taken time to know who we are, we have been designed to be, how we can connect with others on a level that goes beyond an intellectual connection, then we are operating as though we have no heart. Yes, living half a life that is lived only from the head and not from the heart. I could not define from my head because I had been so well programmed to operate from the facts, the results, the evidence, a perspective void of feelings and true connection with others. Oh yes, of course, I would say to myself that all matters of consequence must be from a win-win point of view, that any agreements, contracts, or alliances should always be best for both parties, children, wife, work, religious. No matter what the realm or category, I had convinced myself I was doing the right thing in the right way. But this occurred in the confines of this thing on top of my shoulders, using the magnificent brain you have been given to contextualize and navigate this world within which we live. I had set up ideas, boundaries, concepts from my thinking brain that became a program, operating without much further thought or connection to any other part of my being. Our Western culture operates in a very fast-paced, get-the-job-done mindset that allows little to no time to know who you are. It places little to no value on getting in touch with our inner being. We are a doing society. Everything is related to doing. It is like a badge of honor to say, I've been busy. I think I've heard that a million times when seeing people. It's a kind of like the expected thing to say. It means nothing, but we say it as if it has value attached to it, like because I've been busy, I've been doing this and doing that, then I'm a productive person, accomplishing the task for which I am responsible. For me and millions like me, that's the way in reality within which we operated for decades, while raising a family, generating an income, starting businesses and selling the same, going to church, fulfilling responsibilities, and making more and more commitments to others, leaving less and less time for me to stop, listen, learn, feel, and be. Yes, be, rather than do. For me, it required 9 days away from home with a group of 50 others, not to learn who I was, not to learn what love is, not pursuing a specific goal. Yes, I woke up to what is love by experiencing it, and yes, I came to know who I am, but those were consequences of being guided to see myself for who I am, and not the image I tried to make others see. But those special 12-hour days together were rather simply a time to be open to hear, to listen, to observe, and then determine if I want to go deeper into my being and step outside of the doing for those few days. I was suddenly seeing the world around me in a fresh and new, with no agenda, but with only an openness to be more connected with others as I sought to understand what I was lacking and or what it was I was seeking to find. The restlessness, the questions swirling around, darting in and out of my thoughts and showing up in my interactions with others were demanding answers. In my doing world, I gave no time to such matters. But it seems for many of us, after 50 or 60 years pass, one begins to reckon with the reality that time is getting short. Finding what is really important and most significant become somewhat of an obsession for many of us. For me, it was like awakening one morning and knowing there is more to this life than what I had been giving it credit for. And I lived most of my life as a God-fearing man, so this wasn't really about that element of life, though ultimately it touched on that also in a very uncomfortable way. For me, it was a two-step journey. The first was getting in touch with my emotions, something I had not done over those many decades. Rather, as I write in Metamorphosis, I taught myself in my head to run from my emotions. That for me was a huge beginning point. And it later led to connecting with the real me in a real way, in a world that was quickly passing me until I was able to get off the merry-go-round and start over. There are unanswered questions I had toyed with in my many years, but not attacked by the matters of life, and never went back to address these issues that cried out from within. Those why am I here sort of questions. So I began to address those old questions and life concepts as well, and to look head on at life in a new, loving, fresh way. I noted earlier, I now lead others and walk alongside of those who desire a similar transformation. I do this first in my free community, Profound Pursuits. Most of us over 50 simply notice that life is moving along quickly. We know we want more, but not more stuff, not more activity, but rather more connection, more depth, more of an intentional final phase of our lives. Like me, you may not know the what of your seeking, questioning in your mind and your heart, but rather only that there is a longing for more understanding and living life more authentically. In Profound Pursuits, we start with a simple question. What would you pursue if you stopped living only from obligation and expectation and started living from your essence? Or if you could pursue anything and had no restrictions, time, money, resources, what would that be? I've also created a group experience I call the 30-Day Challenge, mirroring my 9 days away from home experience. And finally, I also walk alongside of others in a one-on-one 9-day experience. Learn about each of these here on my channel. The links are in the post and here in the comments. And I trust that we get to know one another very soon. And yes, here is the video I did last week on love.